Hello, fourth form. Today we're going to continue with Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. We're going to read the first part of chapter 8 from page 113 to 123. Chapter 8, The TV Star. Aunt Linda is my mother's sister. She lives in Boston. Last week she had a baby girl, so now I have a new cousin. My mother decided to fly to Boston to see Aunt Linda and the new baby. I'll only be gone for the weekend, my mother told me. I was sitting on her bed watching her pack. I know, I said. Daddy will take care of you and Fudge. I know, I said again. Are you sure you'll be all right? She asked me. Sure, why not? Will you help Daddy and Fudge? Sure, Mom, don't worry. I'm not worrying. It's just that Daddy is so... Well, he doesn't know much about taking care of children. Then she closed her suitcase. We'll be fine, Mom, I said. I was really looking forward to my weekend. My father doesn't care about keeping things neat. He never examines me to see if I'm clean, and he lets me play up late at night. On Friday morning, all four of us rode down in the elevator to say goodbye to my mother. Henry looked at the suitcase. You going away, Mr. Hatcher? He asked. My mother answered. No, I am Henry. My sister just had her first baby. I'm flying to Boston for the weekend. To help out. New baby, Fudge said. Baby, baby, baby. Nobody paid any attention to him. Sometimes my brother just talks to hear the sound of his own voice. Have a nice visit, Mrs. Hatcher, Henry told my mother when we reached the lobby. Thank you, Henry, my mother said. Keep an eye on my family for me. Will do, Mrs. Hatcher, Henry said, giving my father a wink. Outside, my father hailed a taxi. He put the suitcase in first, then held the door for my mother. When she was settled in the cab, my father said, Don't worry about us. We'll be just fine. Just fine, Mummy, Fudge yelled. Bye, Mom. See you Sunday, I said. My mother blew up kisses. Then her cab drove away. My father sighed while Fudge jumped up and down calling, Bye, Mommy, bye, bye, bye. I had no school that day. The teachers were at a special meeting, so my father said he'd take me and Fudge to the office with him. My father's office is in a huge building made of almost all glass. It's really a busy place. You never see people just sitting quietly at desks. Everyone's always rushing around. A person could get lost in there. My father has a private office and his own secretary. Her name is Janet and she's very pretty. I especially like her hair. It's thick and black. She has the longest eyelashes I ever seen. Once I heard my mother say, Janet must have to get up at the crack of dawn to put on her face. My father just laughed when my mother said it. Janet's seen me before, but this was her first meeting with Fudge. I was glad his hair was finally growing back. I explained right off about his teeth. He'll look a lot better when he's older, I said. He knocked out his front, too. But when he's 6 or 7, he'll get new ones. See, Fudge said, opening his mouth. All gone. My father said, Janet, the boys are going to be here for the morning. Can you amuse them while I clear up some work? Certainly, Mr. Hatcher, Janet said. You go ahead into your office and I'll take the boys on a tour of the rest of the agency. As soon as my father went into his private office, Janet took out her handbag. She reached in and came up with a hairbrush, some lipstick, and a bag of crackers. Want some? She asked, me and Fudge. Okay, I said, taking a handful. Fudge did the same. The crackers were shaped like little goldfish. I nibbled while Janet fixed herself up. She had a big folded mirror in her desk drawer. She set it on top of her desk and went to work on herself. When she was finished, she looked exactly the same as when we came in. But I guess she didn't think so because she said, "That's much better." Then she put all her stuff away and took me by one hand and Fudge by the other. We walked down a long hall, through a doorway, and into another section of the agency. We came to a room where there were a bunch of kids with mothers. I guess there were at least 50 of them. Most of the kids were kind of small, like Fudge. Some were crying. "Is this a nursery school or what?" I asked Janet. She laughed. "They are here to try out for the new toddler bike commercial." "You mean they all want to be the kid who rides the toddler bike on TV?" "Yes, at least their mothers want them to be picked," Janet said. "But we can only use one." "You mean only one out of all these kids is going to be picked?" "That's right," Janet said. "Who picks him?" I asked. "Your father and Mr. Denberg are doing it. But of course Mr. Vincent, the president of the Toddle Bike Company, has to approve." Just then a door opened and a secretary came out. "Next," she called to the waiting kids. "My Murray is next," a mother said. "Oh no, he's not," another mother called. "Sally is next." "Ladies, please, you'll all have a turn," the secretary said. Murray got to be next. He was a little red-headed kid. He wasn't in the room for 2 minutes when the door opened and a big man with a cigar in his mouth came out. "No, no, no," he shouted. "He's not the type at all." Murray was crying. His mother yelled at the big man. "What do you know, anyway? You wouldn't know a treasure if you found one." She shook her fist at him. Janet whispered to me, "That's Mr. Vincent, the president of Toddlebike." Mr. Vincent walked to the center of the room. He looked around at all the kids. When he looked over at us, he pointed and called, "There he is. That's the kid I want." I thought he meant me. I got excited. I could just see myself on TV riding the Toddlebike. All my friends would turn on their seats and say, "Hey, look, there's Peter." While I was thinking about what fun it would be, Mr. Vincent came over to us and grabbed Fudge. He lifted him up. "Perfect," he cried. "He's perfect." The mothers who were waiting packed up their kids and left right away. Mr. Vincent took off with Fudge in his arms. Janet chased him. She called, "But Mr. Vincent, you don't understand." I ran after Janet. Mr. Vincent carried Fudge into the other room. He announced, "I found him myself, the perfect kid to ride the toddle bike in my new commercial." Mr. Vincent put Fudge down and took the cigar out of his mouth. There were 2 other men in the room. One of them was Mr. Denberg. The other one was my father. "Hi, Daddy," Fudge said. "George," my father told Mr. Vincent, "this is my son. He's no actor or model. He can't make your toddle bike commercial." "He doesn't have to be an actor or a model. He's perfect the way he is," Mr. Vincent insisted. "Now, look, George, we want to make the best possible commercial for your company, but Fudge can't be the boy to ride the toddle bike." "Now you listen, Hatcher," Mr. Vincent raised his voice. I wondered why he called my father Hatcher, just like Mr. Yarby did. Mr. Vincent pointed to Fudge. "Either that kid rides my toddle bike or I take my account to another advertising agency. It's that simple." My father looked at Mr. Denberg. "It's your decision, Warren," Mr. Denberg told my father. "I don't want to be the one to tell you what to do." My father picked up Fudge and held him on his lap. "Would you like to ride the toddle bike, Fudge? It's just like the one you have at home." "Why are you asking him?" I said. "What does he know about making commercials?" My father acted like he'd forgotten I was even around. "I'm thinking, Peter," he said. "Please be quiet." "Well, Hatcher," Mr. Vincent said, What'll be? This kid of yours, or do I move to another agency? I remembered how my father lost the Juicy O account because of Fudge. Now, maybe he'd lose this one too, and I don't think he can afford that. Finally, my father said, "All right, George, you can use him. On one condition, though." "What's that, Hatcher?" Mr. Vincent asked. "The commercial has to be made this afternoon. After that, my son Fudge won't be available." "That's fine with me, Hatcher," Mr. Vincent said. "Is he going to get paid?" I asked my father. "I'll worry about that, Peter," my father said. That probably meant yes. He'd be paid and have lots of money in the bank. I'd have nothing. And someday I'd have to borrow from him. No, wait a minute. Never. I'll never borrow money from Fudge. I'll starve first. "Can I at least watch when you make the commercial?" I asked. "Certainly," my father said. "You can watch the whole thing."